Welcome to the Real Board Loft. I'm Trip Forman. Today we got Real Team Rider Will Forrest with us. Will, welcome.
Thank you.
And we are talking about the Channel Islands Happy Every Day, which, according to Will, he is happy every day that he rides this board.
I think so. I don't think I've had a bad session on it yet. So,
I got a text from you, best everyday shortboard ever.
Yep, I think so.
Let's talk about the conditions you're surfing this board in, and overall what your impression is. Let's first talk about how long have you had it?
I've had it for probably a couple months now, 3-4 months, something like that. And I've ridden it in sort of everything.
Yeah.
From just about up to head high barrels and knee high to maybe even a little smaller.
Yeah.
And it works for everything. But I found that what it excels in is anything from knee to chest high and just steep. Like if it is a steep wave,
yep,
this thing just excels. That's kind of where I found that it goes really well. When it's a little bit flatter, you kind of have to work a little harder for the turns, to where when it's steeper, it's so fast off the bottom, and you can just put it wherever in the lip you want it if it's steep, to where when it's a little mushier, maybe you have to work a little harder.
Okay.
But as far as like a small wave board, it is better than most, even in that smaller stuff when it's not, in my opinion, excelling for what it does.
Yep.
But still better than any other board that I've had for small waves. I mean, I rode it one day at the point, and it was probably a little smaller than knee high, but it was offshore winds and throwing a little bit, and it was so fun. Everyone out there was riding 9-foot longboards and just going down the line. And this thing was doing turns and hitting the lip and floaters, and I was just having the best time I've ever had in waves that small.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
What's your height and weight? Let's jump into kind of what size you chose. What's your height and weight, and what are the dimensions on this board?
So I'm 5'9", maybe 5'10", and about 140 pounds.
Okay.
And I chose the 5'6", and it is 25.1 liters.
Yep.
So it's about half a liter more than sort of my, high performance shortboard or bigger wave board. I went a little bit more because when I have a smaller wave board, I like to go with a little bit more volume just so I can catch a lot more waves, and I don't have to pump the board as much.
Okay.
So that's kind of what I went for there. And then the other thing about the board is the glassing on these boards is pretty light.
Yep.
So on smaller waves, it feels really light on your feet. You stand up, and the board is just moving under your feet really fast. And it kind of did take a second to get used to it first, just with how fast it is. Mm-hmm. I don't think I've ever had a board that's as electric in small waves as this one. But once you figure it out, this board just excels pretty much in anything. So
yeah, we've been getting really good feedback on this board for small waves. First from Kai Westcote, and then now from you. For those of you that don't know, this was an off-the-rack board here at Real. So it was a stock board that was on the rack. Will found his size, grabbed it. 5'6", 18 3/4, 2 1/4, 25.1 liters. What were you using for the fins in it, Will?
So I got the Matt Biolis, I think, Mayhem fins, and this is my first board with FCS2.
Okay.
So these were, and I had never had FCS before, so I had to ask some people, and these were kind of what I was told were the basic, high performance shortboard fins.
Yep.
And they're a little bit more raked out than maybe your average small wave fin or a pivot fin. And I think that with this board, it just gives it a little bit more drive. Yeah, I think I went a little bit bigger too. A lot of my small wave boards, I ride small fins.
Okay.
But these are mediums.
Those are mediums, right?
So,
okay.
I normally don't put the mediums in my groveler boards, but this one I decided to, and it worked. So. And
was that a function of how wide the tail was you went with them, or you trying some different theories, or why do you go medium?
The tail is really wide. Okay. So I thought that maybe with the small ones I would slide out a little too much, just because they wouldn't have as much hold with the tail having so much buoyancy. I thought that going with a little bit bigger fin would be a little better, and it was. I never tried it with the small fins, but I think with how well it went, there was no point in even thinking about that. So, but yeah, the tail was kind of my biggest concern about the board with how wide it was, but it proved me wrong. It's so good for small waves. It's really easy to kind of put the board where you want it, and then kind of move the tail through your turns. So that was kind of like my favorite part, is you can, go towards the lip and then push the tail up, and it releases when you want it to.
What about on the upper end? So you talked about the smallest waves you surfed it in. Like, what about on the bigger side, whether it be like the size of the wave or the hollowness of the wave? Like, kind of what's the most extreme stuff you put this thing in?
So I rode it probably about head high, maybe a little bit bigger, and it went well. It didn't struggle at all. I think I rode it that day at the Outer Banks Board Riders contest at Avon Pier, and it was slightly overhead in the morning when I was free surfing, and then a little smaller in my heat. And it was just going good all day. I think that was actually the first day that I rode the board, and the morning was really good barrels, and I had a few really good barrels on it, and then in the afternoon I was doing turns on it. So it was good in both sides.
Right.
So.
And have you put it in any conditions like where it started to come unglued, like where it's like, what this, maybe I should start thinking about another board, or the too happy above it, or something like that?
I think once it gets a little bit bigger, I've had a few times where I come off the bottom and the tail is a little hard to control because it's so wide. It just feels like there's a little bit too much rail out of the water when I'm bottom turning. So once it gets to that point, which is just, I feel slightly overhead waves, then I decide to ride something else. But, kind of like what it is, I guess the happy every day, most days are not going to be overhead, especially here. So this is kind of the perfect board for anything below that.
And what about from an accessibility level? Like you're an ESA All-Star, and so below your level, like how low of a level could somebody come into this board? I think
about like once you're starting to do more turns and you're flowing down the line and you want something that's a little bit quicker under your feet, maybe something that's going to move faster and you have more control over where the board's going. Kind of like, I would say this is would be like the next step up from like a fish. Or maybe like a smaller groveler board with a flatter rocker, because this is more, I would call this like a high performance small wave board.
Right.
So once you're trying to find a new small wave board that's a little more high performance than what you have, I think this is a good start.
Be a good option.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, I will say, it took a little bit getting used to with how fast it was, but once you get that figured out, it is really, really good board.
Yeah, so nice. Awesome. That's great feedback. Well, thank you so much for joining us. If any of you out there have any questions about the Channel Islands Happy Every Day, or would like to order one, either stock or custom, you can always reach us at the shop, 252-987-6000, or look us up online, realwatersports.com/surfing. Thanks for tuning in.